Hello and welcome to Newsmakers on CHCH Podcast. I'm Louie Butko, and the third Monday in January is often referred to as Blue Monday. And while originally it referred to the most depressing day of the year, it is sometimes connected to other events around that day. Now, though it was originally conceived by a UK travel company, it has helped spark an important conversation when it comes to taking a look at our mental health. And joining us today to discuss the phenomenon is Pathstone mental health registered psychotherapist Erin Clayton. She also serves as Director of Quality Assurance, Research and Planning for Pathstone. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Louie.
Erin, before we get into what I'm sure is going to be a great conversation on mental health, tell us a little bit about yourself and Pathstone.
So Pathstone Mental Health, I'm very excited to talk about. We're the lead agency for children's mental health in the Niagara region. So what that means is we're the primary provider. So if you're looking for children's mental health services in Niagara, you're coming to us or through us. So we facilitate all those referrals. So we're multi-service, multi-site, and people can access us through our walk-in centers. So, if you're just having a question about mental health, if things are bothering you, we're really proud that we've branched out into the community. So we have some of those locations are in the malls, but our goal, aspiration at Pathstone Mental Health is a healthy, well community. So we do that through our services, we do it through our public education, we do it through our accessibility. Myself, so I've been in mental health for, and it always shocks me when I say 29 years, creeping up on 30. And in that time, I've been really proud to be part of different services, but it's a part of our well-being that I think more so now than 20 years ago we're talking about. So even conversations like having me here today, whether we're talking about it because of Blue Monday or not, it's a reason to talk about mental health. And I think we should always be talking about our mental health. It's a part of our health, part of our wellness.
I know recently your drop-in center in the Penn Center won an award. I was just at the Penn Center, that beautiful wall that you have there, again, talking about social media and tips for teens and youth, and we'll get into all that. The one thing about youth mental health I find interesting is the confidential aspect of it. So how do you work with young patients' confidentiality and the concerns of their parents?
Well, confidentiality in therapy is the crux, because in therapy counseling, you want to be safe. So what if you're having a youth in session alone through any of our services, what they say is private unless and until they're in danger or they're at risk of harming themselves, or they're being harmed. So that's the caveat that we always give. And it's generally understood. For parents, they understand it, but they want to know, right? So it can be a kind of bind if we're working with a whole family, which we always do because nothing happens in isolation. But there's a lot of value to everybody having their own time, and then we'll bring that together. But the process of therapy really hinges on people being able to feel like what they say, what they're bringing is in a safe space that no one's going to say unless they have permission to do so. And quite honestly, a lot of people that we see across the age band, that's the issue, is they feel out of control. So if we take that away, we're just making the problem worse, really.
Let's talk about Blue Monday. You and I were talking in the green room a little bit. I did mention there, if you go back to its roots, a UK travel company came out with this press release, and there was a mathematical formula attached to it. But Blue Monday, what does it mean to you and to you people at Pathstone?
Well, you asked if it was like real science.
Yeah, I did. I was going to ask, is it pseudoscience or no? What can we say?
We could say that about any science, right? But I think it's an opportunity to have a discussion. So any access point, anything that leads us to a discussion about mental health, whether we're debating the merits of the science or not, bring us to that there's importance. And let's be honest, people are just getting over Christmas, and there's so much upheaval, pressure, excitement, heaviness, stress. With Christmas, moving into the new year, a lot of people are really feeling like I'm fresh, it's exciting, I can turn a page, and that's great energy. But here's where we need to sometimes talk about the motivation to keep changes going. And so, I would believe that. And, we live in Canada, and I don't know about you, Louie, but I love the seasons, I love the weather. Today, we're fortunate it's not subarctic and it's a lovely snowfall out there, but some days it's a little bit harder, it's dark. So all of those factors contribute. We don't just just walk through life in these bubbles. And so I think, there's some credibility to that. January can be hard for lots of reasons. Every day can be hard for everyone. And, let's put that on the map. Let's talk about that's real, that happens, and where do we go? What do we do with that?
You kind of touched on it there, like someone's stress over Blue Monday, like they might have a reason to be like, okay, I feel it. And you mentioned a couple of things. Bills that could be coming in post holidays, just the high of holidays and then the low of the weeks after, shorter days, and maybe failure of your resolutions, right? You usually get about halfway or however, not you specifically, but a lot of people who try resolutions fail them and might be feeling down on themselves. So is someone's stress over Blue Monday, could it be rooted in other issues and concerns, or could it just be, this is what being human is?
All of the above. I think it could be all of it. I think it's, sometimes stress, the three things that we have in our control always as humans is how we feel, what we do, and how we think. So those things don't always happen so collectively. So, could we be having a bad day because the bills are late? Absolutely. The world is getting nothing but more expensive. If we're listening to the news on CH, there's lots of things that would make people feel upset. Being able to have a space, whether it's Blue Monday, allows you to acknowledge that. That's the first step, is being able to say, well, what is it that I'm stressed about, and what am I going to do with that? What are my options? And sometimes it's being able to have forums, public forums, these conversations like you and I are having, to say it's okay. Yeah. It's okay to say, and it's okay also to not know. Yeah. To be able to start to learn to recognize something's going on for me. Yeah. What is it, and then what do I do, and why might it be happening? And sometimes people still need a reason, a tangible, to say, oh, it's because it's Blue Monday. That's what it is. To help them give themselves permission to say, it's okay that I'm struggling a little bit. My job as a professional is to say, okay, so how can I help you? And my job is to be available. Where can they find me to get help, right? How do I find somebody to say, to validate, oh yeah, this is kind of a bummer of a day, or it's dark, or it's hard, or you know what? Yeah, it could be this, could not be. Yeah. What are we going to do with that? These conversations, for so long, mental health was so stigmatized. It was so taken apart from health. We didn't talk about it. And now we're talking about it more and more and more, and there's nothing but gain to come from that, right? And especially for our youth, normalizing all these parts of our experience, because getting through life can be hard. It can be great, but it's also how we shift our energy, how we think, again, is really important and in our control. Couple
of words that you said there that stood out to me were acknowledgement and normalize.
Yeah.
Two words that sound easy. Just acknowledging it and saying, I think I'm dealing with something.
Yeah.
And normalizing it. I am dealing with something, respect me, respect my boundaries, all that kind of stuff. What about those people who can't acknowledge it to themselves, who can't even begin to normalize it because of that issue?
Well, I think that's where we professionals come in, to be able to have media out, information out, places accessible to say, what are you feeling? Like, people will always know. You'll always know that something's off. What it is, you may not know. And I think a lot of people want to kind of reason through and rationalize through their problems. That's the last place that's available. It's really getting to, well, tell me what you're feeling, and normalizing that, validating that, right? And people can say, kids, as young as they are, will be able to tell you what their body feels like. My stomach feels upset, or my shoulders feel a little bit stressed, or I feel, and it's adding that word. Okay, that could be worry. Oh, that could be, you might be afraid. Okay, that happens. That's normalizing, right? But it's connecting it to that, and then saying, okay, what could I do with that? But that goes back to, if we're not talking about that, there's no way that we're going to teach those skills and make that okay, and make it okay to not know. I can use a lot of words. My business is words, but words are just words. I say normalize, I say acknowledge. What does that mean? That might have no meaning to someone. So it's also knowing that and getting down to, the human experience is unique, it's individual, but collectively we're all having emotions, we're all having experiences, we're all feeling things, and we're all wondering things, and we're all doing things. And we want to do those together. So it's really, as long as I've worked in this field, it's helping people to say, somebody is paying attention to you, and somebody is going to listen to you and ask you questions and listen. Those things. People will then relax, because that's sometimes what we need. Because if it's in our head, it's only in our head. And it's always, I don't know about you, but it's always 10 times worse in your head. So that can feel overwhelming, and that shuts people down. And people will keep doing the same thing over and over again, because often, quite honestly, they don't know that there's another option. No. So it's the same thing, like you say. You know, people, I think it's great when people start off a new year and they think, I'm going to do this. Often it's the lull of getting to the point, you know, I use the gym. Everybody's going to go to the gym. But they get to the gym and now they're sore, right? They've been walking on that treadmill and now their legs hurt. And often people think, oh, that's the signal I'm not doing something right, which is actually not correct. That's a signal that something's going right. Nothing comes without discomfort, but discomfort pushes us back. So it's being able to say, feel that, but if you don't know what that means, if I was saying it to, you know, our people in Niagara, pop over to the pen, come see one of my counselors and say, I have this wonky feeling, and they're going to say, yeah, of course you do. Yeah. Let's talk about that. That's where you can begin to then inspire people to say, oh, it's okay. It's safe. Right? Safe. I can go say, and it's the same thing if we're talking about youth. Why are we in the mall? That's why. Because that's where they are. That's where their friends are. And if something happened at school and they're just not quite sure, they can poke their head in. It's pretty safe. Yeah. No one's going to tell on them. It's not going to look odd. They don't have to feel like they're going to the doctor. But they can go and get a really good conversation about something. And it's those somethings that if we can start to have those conversations more, we don't have these big crises, right? We're not in a reactive stance. We're proactively talking about our health and wellness. It's the same like having a good diet. Yeah. Why does that help? Right?
Or catching something early. Right? I mean, that is what you're doing, right? You're catching an illness early, just like you would want to catch cancer early or anything, a mental health crisis. It gets to that point.
Exactly.
That's preventable.
That's right. We want people, instead of flooding the ERs and being in crisis there, come ask a question. And sometimes, honestly, people will say, I don't know what brought me here, but something. Yeah. Great. Let's sit down and talk about that. That's, to your point, that is acknowledging something doesn't feel right. You don't have to know what that something is. You know, as long as I've worked with parents, I say, you're not trained to be a mental health professional, but you know your kids. Watch them. And if you don't know, you don't know. Ask. Find somebody. Because that's what we would do with a health issue, right? If your child had a rash, I mean, I might Google it, right? All my Google Doc a little bit, but we're going to be able to say, oh, I don't know what this is. I threw a little bit of this on it, but you know what? I need to go help. For some reason, for so long, we've not felt the same about our mental health, our mental wellness, to be able to have that permission to say, I don't know. I need to go find somebody. Yeah. And sometimes I think part of it was not being able to find somebody. And that's where at Pathstone we've really put a lot of energy to being out there. That's why there's that giant wall in the mall, right? It's okay. That's why we have things in the bathroom stalls. That's where people are. We hope it gives that message. It's okay. And you know what? It's right here. Yeah. It doesn't have to be your job to come find us. We'll come find you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Back to Blue Monday. If somebody is acknowledging it and realizing, what piece of advice would you have for them, or advice to manage Blue Monday, or to take that first step and seek help? What would you tell them?
That's a big question. There's lots of parts. I think if somebody reads Blue Monday and it resides with them in any way, I think to really notice that. I always say to people, notice. What does it do? How does it make you feel? What does it make you kind of want to do? You know, I also would say if it inspires a thought or a feeling and you don't understand it, then write it down. Or phone someone. You know, there's lots of crisis lines. There's lots of, you know, we have a crisis line. There's 988. There's different crisis lines. But go talk to someone. If you have an inner circle, I think express that. Because I think that's the path to understanding. Again, I think a lot of people internalize things a lot. They feel like they're both the problem and the solution, and that can be very complicated.
Yeah.
So I think having support.
The inner circle is really important, and I think there is something about pushing past the awkwardness almost of bringing it up, because it is, even I find myself, man in my 30s, hanging out with my friends also when they're 30s, you don't want to bring down the conversation with, hey guys, this is really eating me up, or this is, I haven't been feeling great. How do you push? What would your advice be to push through that awkwardness? Because it can be tough to say, hey guys, I'm struggling right now, or hey, I can't come out this week, or I don't want to do this because I just don't feel right.
Well, there's no way past the discomfort. It's through it, right? So if we use the gym analogy, if you want to build that muscle, you have to go through. Right? It's the same. It's acknowledging that this is hard for me to bring up. And sometimes the monologue that we have running in our head, saying it out loud, saying, this is really hard for me to bring up. Like, I feel like I'm going to bring down the conversation, but I'm struggling. Or, people will ask for help. I always say to people, don't leap to help. We leap to help. And that can shut people down. Because
Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you doing okay? What's wrong, man?
That's right. And what does that make you do? Fine.
Good.
Yeah, good. Fine.
Easy.
Right, exactly. So
defensive right away, right?
Well, it's invalidating because what you're saying is, I know better than you. You're not making the space to have a conversation, right? If I came here and I said, Louie, you know what your problem is? This is what your problem is, and this is what you should do. You're going to be like,
you wouldn't be the first one, Erin. You wouldn't be the first one.
You're going to be like, what does she think she knows? She thinks she knows something. If I said to you, how are you? And you're like, okay. And I was like, oh, okay. Sure?
Yeah.
Then you're going to maybe feel like, okay. But it's really knowing that it's going to be uncomfortable and saying to yourself, this is going to be uncomfortable, and getting the skills, finding the skills and finding the bravery to say, there's no way past that. And, sometimes it's just saying it out loud, taking a deep breath, and, creating that space to say, and you will find your people. Right? It may not be your friends. It may not be your friends when you're out to dinner, but then you might say, but I need to, because what you're making, when you're noticing it and acknowledging it, you're making that important to say, but I need to figure this out. I need to, and maybe it's not here, but then where? Right? It's really prioritizing ourselves, because at the end of the day, that's who we're left with.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's having different people around us for different things. Yeah. So it may not be your group of friends. Yeah. It may not be your family, but it may be a professional. That might be what you need. It may not. It may be a coworker, but it's giving yourself the opportunity, because in acknowledging the discomfort and acknowledging the problem, you're saying, well, but I want to do something with this, and why? So that's how you'll also coach yourself through the process of trying, because you're going to say, well, but it's important for me to figure this out.
Yeah. Pathstone has been around 50 years now. We touched on a few of it already as part of this conversation, but just the way that mental health has evolved in that time. I mean, we would fill a few hours in terms of how Pathstone has changed in that time, but speaking to the broader conversation of mental health, as a mental health professional, how encouraged are you by the campaigns that are being run? And sometimes, even the Bell Let's Talk campaign can get its own negatives and positives, but again, it sparks a conversation. What does it mean to you to see these conversations more out in the open?
I think it's amazing. I mean, when I first started working in mental health in the 90s, we didn't talk about it. It was really compartmentalized. It was really kind of taboo topic. So I think any way that it comes to media, comes to the forefront, is a great conversation. I'm not jazzed that the numbers, are as high as they are, that, when we think about children and youth, 1 in 5 tracks really for 1 in 4. But I can see that in two ways. Is it that we're having more mental health issues? Is it that we know more about mental health, so we have better diagnostics? is it that we have greater awareness and uptake of people actually asking for service? So I think, again, I try to see it across that spectrum. I do feel encouraged that the mental health professionals are working more with clients, with families to design services that really work for them. And I can say that of Pathstone, that we've really, learned that lesson to say, it's great for me to have an idea that this service is going to help you, but actually maybe I don't know, right? So there's, I think, a lot more humility. And I think there's a lot more energy from children, youth, and families to really say, this is what we need. I think there's a lot of advocacy. I think there's a lot of conversation. And I do think that there's, COVID really turned the needle. It really made it created this global understanding of how important and integral our mental health was, because people who had never had a mental health issue were feeling it, right? Yeah. They were feeling isolation. They were feeling anxiety. And I think that was a tipping point for a lot of people to say, you know what, this is really important and let's keep this in the conversation. So I think, we're always really grateful for CH's support and the support of media outlets like yourself, because you're in people's houses, right? You're on our TVs, you're on our phones, and we need that relationship. I have lots to say. I'll come back anytime. But I need a place to say it. Yeah. And so I think it's really those relationships have blossomed. And I think the while technology, and we could talk about technology back and forth, there's a positive there, because if a person has a question, or if they wanted to hear something about Blue Monday, they're going to look at your podcast, and maybe something will land with them and say, oh yeah, that makes sense.
You mentioned COVID, and I was going to talk about, we're going to go back to youth, but I've from an outsider view, and I don't have kids, or I have nieces and nephews and little cousins and stuff, but the missing out of schools, missing out on that time with your friends, the going online, the normalization of being on the computer all day almost, with youth being bombarded from all these sources. Like I couldn't imagine. It was hard enough being a kid when I was a kid, and that was X number of years ago. I'm not going to say it. Don't worry. But it was hard enough being a kid when I was a kid. And now I'm thinking, they have a cell phone in their hand at this age. They're on social media at this age. Like, for parents you can't monitor them 24/7 or what they do on their phones. It just seems hard. How do you help kids manage those sorts of things? It's a big question. I know.
It's a big question, but I think it's really, from a parenting perspective, from a child and youth perspective, there's a lot of layers that I think if we look at generations, they might not see it differently, but certainly there's more access points, right? So parents certainly feel like they have less control. They have a lot more fear, less control. Kids feel lots of times very overwhelmed, and there's no shut off. So we certainly see social media in that regard with bullying, right? There's no disconnection. It's hard to disconnect. Kids have a lot of worry about, well, if I don't post, if I don't tag this, if I don't see this, to keep up. So it really can be doing a lot of work with the individual and what it actually is for them. And there's a lot of individual meaning, right? Why kids are very invested in social media, and it's a natural part of their life. So the idea of abstinence, like of having no social media is not, it's not reasonable, because they're using it at school. Like even lots of the curriculum, kids are using their computers. They're not doing pen to paper tasks anymore. So it's finding that balance. There's a lot of education about safety, boundaries. So similarly to how we used to do about crossing the road or doing those things, there's those basics. But there is this important component of like life wellness balance that needs to intersect with our mental health, that how you're creating boundaries around media, social media, because there is a lot of time lost in Googling, in looking at pictures and trying to emulate things that are simply unreasonable, and they're not real. right? They're filtered, they're not real.
Is this something you believe should be part of curriculum at an early age? Is this something teachers should be telling our students or our kids? Because again, you're, as a parent, you can say whatever you want when they get home, but you believe that this should be something curriculum-based, social media literacy, mental health literacy, Yes,
I think, the schools moved to have parameters around phones, use of phones. The reason why is they were seeing them overtake time. So I think that's one step, but that's just restriction. Kids going to be on the phone, they're going to be on the phone. How we use it. We don't let people drive a car without instruction. We don't, we do a lot of teaching and in life about many things. And I think this is an aspect of life. And, it's only going to grow. AI is coming, all these, it's not going away. Technology is not going away. But how do we, when we have knowledge, when we have instruction, then we feel, parents will feel like a measure of safety. Well, I feel ruddered in this. Kids will too. And, we want to teach people to trust themselves, to understand and make decisions and problem solve and understand, benefits, consequences, those things. And I think that applies to media, social media, because it is an integral part of life today.
Yeah.
And so I think that should happen at school. I think definitely, in the work we do at Pathstone, it's part of that. And we're building things specifically in that regard that we're going to, I think, spend a lot of time talking about in the future. But I think it's really multifold. And yes, I do think it should be part of curriculums in many places. You would hope. And again, like you said, it's not going anywhere, and abstinence is not an option, because asking your kid to stay off the phone is going to be a tall task, and it won't happen. It won't happen. And parents are giving their kids phone as a measure of safety. So it's just this normed part of life that we have computers in our pockets. Mental health stigma has come a long way. Is there still more we can do, and what can we be doing? Always more. Yeah, because I think it's to your point. Like sometimes people still are stigmatizing themselves. So I think it's just keeping that conversation going, because stigma takes many forms. It's maybe it's not so stigmatizing to say mental health, but maybe to identify that you're struggling with it is still complicated. Right? Like you said, a lot of that could be internal. Maybe more of it is internal versus external. Can be. Yeah. It just takes many forms, I think, but having the conversation just, again, normalizes the more that we talk about it. So to that point, I mean, if you are someone who acknowledges it, and we talked about it, maybe your support group's not your friends, maybe your support group's not your family, acknowledging it and then being shut down, let's say by a parent or by another relative or a friend, but that's not it. Like, that seems like it can be debilitating, because you're taking that step to acknowledge it, and then to be shut down. What would your advice be to that person who has somebody who says, no, it's just dark, it's January, everybody's a little down? Like, how do trust yourself? Trust yourself. Right? And if that's not your person, then, but don't blow up at them, though, right? I mean, that's the other. Could you? I mean, well, you could. I mean, we can. We can. We can. But I mean, I think that just will create another problem. Yeah. Right. So again, it's where I say to parents, just because you can't, or people, sometimes you can't see it, it doesn't make that it not real. And sometimes when we're telling people and they are shutting it down, that's about them, because they might think, well, I don't know what to do. Right? So if they say, oh no, it's fine, right? Then that's really, because I don't know how to help you. Yeah. So again, if that was the more normalized conversation. So if a child says, no, Blue Mondays just got me feeling, I'm in my head a little bit. I'm at school and, I'm at lunch, and I say to my friend, something's in my head, and they're like, nah, it's just, you heard the word, now you think it. And then you can think, no, it's not that, right? Try to persevere. And that's that, trust yourself, and, find a teacher, find a counselor, call a helpline, say it. You'll find somebody who will say, yeah, tell me about that. Yeah. And, it's that perseverance that, I hope the conversations about mental health and stigma inspire. Yeah. Just because somebody doesn't agree doesn't mean it's not happening for you. And just, that disagreement could be not about you at all.
Yeah. Pop in at the Penn Center, or is it the River Road? Look, what's the Welland one? The
River Road and Seaway Mall.
And
so we're the Seaway Mall.
A couple places in Welland you can pop in.
Welland.
So generally, what advice would you give to parents and children about day-to-day stresses? What's your advice to handling? It's very stressed. Like you said, you can watch the news, you can flip through social media, you can get down really quick. What would you say generally to fighting stress day to day?
I think try to acknowledge your stress if it shows up and manage it, and don't try to solve everything, right? Take one step at a time. It's okay to not be okay, as trite as that sounds, but it isn't. And think about, if you're not feeling okay, what can I do to acknowledge that, and what can I do to shift it? What can I do to put one foot in front of the other?
What do you got coming up at Pathstone? I know there's always lots of exciting things happening at Pathstone. I know I probably should have put the question to Marla. Marla's looking at us in the background, being like, website, though.
The website always has great information, social media. So we have tips, tricks. So if for those parents or kids who wake up and think that they kind of need a little inspiration for the day, check our social media, because we usually have some great mental health tips there. As we said, pop into any of our walk-ins if you just need a little chat. Drop in at the Penn Center, drop in at the Seaway Mall if you're out shopping. All of our locations, all of our sites, and if you need any clarification, we have a 1-800 number, so that can be used for question, concern, crisis, conversation, question. So just reach out to pathstonementalhealth.ca, and
yeah. And even the numbers you said the 1 in 5, maybe closer to 1 in 4, the 11 years old, the average age of youth that's seeking help in Niagara, and that's one of 18,000 youth in Niagara alone that are dealing with some sort of mental health. You are doing fantastic work at Pathstone. You got that beautiful building on 4th Avenue. So go check them out there. Go check them out the walk-in. Erin, thank you for making the time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. My thanks to Erin for joining us today, and my thanks to you as well, because we could not do the show without your support. And hey, that was our first show of 2025. I noticed at the bottom right there, Laura Brody, it said 2024. We got to fix that. All right. Thanks to Laura Brody. She's the director. She directed today's episode. It wasn't her mistake. Don't worry. It wasn't hers. It was mine. Thank you, Laura. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. And make sure you like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss an episode of this show or any of the other great shows we have for you, including Sportsline with Bubba O'Neill. You can go to chch.com/podcast to get all your favorite podcasts. All right. One more time. Thank you for joining us. From all of us here at CHCH, I'm Louie Butko. Have a great day.